I think managers need to understand that what has worked in the past is not necessarily an indication that what is going to work, that same thing is going to work in the future. So imagine the time saving and the accuracy that goes into that. So so that's one more area where artificial intelligence is really playing. And I think it's not only on the recruitment, but post an offer goes to a person, there are chatbots or there are intelligent tools or virtual assistants that actually engage with the candidate. So sometimes a person may have questions about, hey, tell me the culture of my company, of the company I'm
Yeah.
joining, or what kind of benefits am I going to get. So instead of calling up the HR and speaking, you can do this pretty much virtually. I'm a strong believer that everybody in the company should be allowed to recognize anybody in the company.
Neville Postwalla is the AVP Talent Management at the Harbinger Group and comes with extensive HR and organizational communications experience. He's been the recipient of multiple HR awards, and today we're talking to him about leveraging AI across the recruitment, talent management, and feedback cycle. So let's dive right in. Welcome to the show. So happy to have you.
Thanks, Ashika. Good to be here.
Neville, we are talking of acting and we are talking of plays. The world of work today seems a lot like the film The Intern, the one with Anne Hathaway, the modern young startup boss woman, and the experienced and wise intern in Robert De Niro. Now, in a workplace scenario with senior leaders, on one hand, with the wisdom and experience that they have, and young professionals, young managers, young startup owners, how can these young managers leverage the experience and the expertise of the wise while embracing fresh ideas from the new ones and sort of marry the two? Is there an effective framework?
Um, I don't think there's an effective framework as such. I think it differs from people to people. Let me give you my views on that. So, Yashika, I think that previous experience and things like that matter, but up to a certain point. But I think post that, it's more of the capability, it's more of the problem solving, it's how you get along with people of different generations and different diversity backgrounds. Building consensus with them, that matters. So I think these things need to be considered when one is delegating work or giving new assignments to other people. I think also that I think things like having a culture of respect and open communication with everybody in the organization, irrespective of whichever level they are in, and making it an environment where people feel free to come forth and share their ideas, their perspectives, and that too without a fear of judgment and criticism. Because sometimes
Yeah.
people are definitely a little worried. Somebody could be senior. If I say something, what's going to happen? So the minute you break down those barriers and say it's okay to share your ideas and perspectives, and no one's going to judge you, I think that's really important. I think on the diversity and inclusion, I think we need to understand as leaders that individuals, bring their own perspective, backgrounds, and ideas to the table. So I
Yeah.
think at that level, you kind of really need to respect diversity, whether it's age, background, experience, because I think that the value of diversity brings you a really strong and well-rounded team, and then everybody feels included, and everybody feels that their voices are being heard. And then I think finally, I can go on, but I think finally, I think managers need to understand that what has worked in the past is not necessarily an indication that what is going to work, that same thing is going to work in the future. So
Yeah.
managers need to be adaptive to take on different ideas, be willing to take risks, and kind of delegate to other people as well. So yeah, those are some of the views that I have on this.
What about in such cases there are such strong opinions that people may form because with age comes wisdom and with wisdom comes I know this, I've done this, or I've experienced this.
Hmm,
This may lead to a conflicting scenario with a younger person or a younger individual team member manager.
right.
um, How does one deal with that sensitive sort of a conflict or a predicament in that sense?
Yeah, I think it's tough, honestly, because many times when you have that level of expertise, you know how a particular problem is to be solved because
Yep.
you've done that probably in different instances at some point of time. So I think it's good to kind of sometimes hold back and say, I'm not going to pass judgment. I'm not
Yeah.
going to give the solution, and let somebody else, give that solution. And I will help the person if he or she needs help. I will be that sounding block, but I'm not going to be the one to give suggestions because sometimes we're in a habit of blurting it out because we want things to be done fast. So we will say,
Yeah.
hey, you know what? This is the problem. Let's do one, two, three, but that's not really going to grow your team. So I think holding back is something that we need to think about.
Interesting. You know, I was reading. There's just been so much. AI has become the buzzword suddenly, and there's just multiple posts across the internet only on AI and how it's affecting the workplace, job scenarios, and so forth. How can people managers effectively utilize the power of AI to attract new talent?
Well, there's a lot of stuff that's actually been happening in this space, especially in the recruitment front.
Yeah.
um, I think AI is really, I think something, it's something that is pretty much, what would I say, transform people. So I can give you some scenarios, Yashika, where I see AI kind of partnering with the recruitment business. So is that okay if
Hmm.
I do that?
Yes, please.
So, yeah, thanks. One area is the area of job descriptions. So, traditionally, the HR people have kind of written very, very long job descriptions, and we hope that that's going to be something great that's going to attract talent. But I think using smart tools like AI or Chat GPT, job descriptions can be generated just by giving a couple of sentences to the system, and I think you get a job description that is more attractive, which is more relevant, and the chances of people applying to that is great. Is higher. So that's one.
Yeah, I'm going to interrupt you here. For the longest time, I think most people managers, especially in the talent acquisition realm, have been sort of at the center of being ones that use templatized versions of the same job descriptions, and you'll see that okay, there is a JD, and within a certain kind of
Okay.
department a job,
And
and
that looks so
I believe
typical,
this is
right?
the era of customization,
Exactly,
possibly.
exactly. It looks so typical and it looks so canned. I mean, people can figure out that, oh, someone's just putting data into, is putting words into some kind of a template. It's not personalized. That's absolutely true. So yeah, so that's a great point. So job descriptions one, but there are fantastic AI tools that actually match candidates to the position. So you may
Yes.
post something on a job portal, and you may get like 10,000 people applying to that position. Now imagine if a recruiter has to go through 10,000 CVs and figure
Yeah.
out which ones are most relevant. Now cut forward to AI, where you have systems who do that in a matter of minutes, and you can say, okay, show me the resumes which have a 90% fit to this position. So imagine the time saving and the accuracy that goes into that. So so that's one more area where artificial intelligence is really playing a
Yeah.
strong role. Another area where ChatGPT is coming into play is that I will input a job description into the system, and I will tell the system, give me the five most relevant questions to ask during my interview, and
Nice.
what are the
Yeah.
most expected answers. So instead of a recruiter actually kind of churning up their questions, you have a system that actually does that for you, and that's actually a reality. And then if you step back to campus interviews, where some companies go and meet thousands of students, and we give them assessments, and you have platforms, and all that kind of stuff happens. Um, there are there are there are facial recognition software. So you keep your
Hmm.
camera on while you're giving your exam or you're giving your assessment, and the system will actually check your identity first. So you minute you put your Aadhaar card up, it will look at the photograph on your Aadhaar card and it will match it with what's on the screen. So the chances of impersonation are kind of reduced, not gone, but reduced. And the second thing is, if people are using unfair means, so for example, if I'm looking around or if I'm kind of looking at somebody, the system will detect that something unfair is happening, and you can tell the system, okay, give like two warnings, and the system will say, you know what, please don't do this. It looks like you're using unfair means, and the second time it happens, the person gets kicked out of the assessment. So that's how in the recruitment space, kind of, things are actually moving up. And I think it's not only on the recruitment, but post an offer goes to a person, there are chatbots or there are intelligent tools or virtual assistants that actually engage with the candidate. So sometimes a person may have questions about, hey, tell me the culture of my company, of the company I'm
Yeah.
joining, or what kind of benefits am I going to get. So instead of calling up the HR and speaking, you can do this pretty much virtually. And then the entire onboarding, for people who've joined companies and who've had the nightmare of filling up tons and tons of forms, I think this has
Mm.
become more on conversational based. So you have a speech to text, you will talk to a virtual assistant and your forms will get filled up pretty much automatically, and then you'll get a review and say, hey, is this correct? Just digitally sign this and you're done. So it's a fun space to be in now.
You mentioned unfair means, and I'm going to come and pick on that. uh, Interestingly, AI works on both ends, Neville. As much as it helps the people manager or the talent manager in this scenario, today a candidate may also put that JD up on ChatGPT and say, "What are my expected questions?" and give me the expected answers. That means that uh, the evolution of the recruiter, or rather the role of the recruiter, is so transformed from what it was to be better prepared,
Totally.
to sort of surpass that sort of a space. Don't you think
No,
so?
no, absolutely. And like I said, when you ask for the questions, you probably ask for the desired answers as well.
Right.
And the interviewer, if the interviewer is smart enough to know that, hey, these questions seem to be the answers seem to be pretty much out of the textbook. The
Hmm.
flow of interviewing or the direction of interviewing can easily change, and that's what makes a difference. So AI will not replace it, but AI will help enable it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about, rewards and recognitions. Rewards and recognitions have been such a, I would not say, it's at a stage where most often than not, it's only restricted to a pat on the back, a great email, oh, great stuff in there, or maybe gift vouchers and, things like that. What, according to you, are some innovative ways in today's modern world where organizations can recognize and reward employees in order to motivate them and engage them much more than just like, hey, that was a good job?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Yashika, and I think that's where a lot of creativity and innovativeness needs to be done. Many organizations normally have their reward and recognition framework that is set up. I'm not a big fan of long service awards or annual awards or stuff that gets done post facto. You do
Yeah.
something and then you get rewarded. I would rather companies have frameworks where instant gratification can be done, or
Yeah.
almost instant recognition can be
Almost.
done.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think that is something important, because I think recognition delayed is recognition denied.
yeah.
That's how I look at it. Take an example of a kid. A kid does something wrong. Um, the mom or dad is going to scold that kid immediately. The mom and dad is not going to wait for 6 months when the birthday comes up and says, hey, you know what? I am not giving you a present because you did this 6 months ago. So I think that needs to be kind of done on a continuous basis. So rewards has to be on a continuous basis. And I think in this day and age of social media, I think recognition should be allowed to be posted on social media. Obviously,
Okay.
there's some confidential stuff like customer names, etc., that can't be put up. But you
Yeah.
see a lot of people posting social media posts with, certificates of appreciation that they've received. And I think that is really great, because that is really creating their brand, number one, and that's making them feel happy because you get a bunch of likes and comments, on those posts that are there. So,
That's an interesting one. That's, Neville, I'm going to this reminds me of a time that I was with the Taj Group of hotels in their learning and development space. And at that point in time, and I'm talking about 12 years ago, uh, they used to have this star of the month or star employee of the month, and they used to have this sort of a printout taken, and the good job or a good deed that they did, and it was on the clipboard there throughout that week or that time. And interestingly, that now has become the social media or the digital platform. You gave an example of the parent and their child. Let's think about this a tad differently, especially because in the organizational scenario, we're talking about scale, and we're talking about multiple people across multiple departments and multiple roles. Also, people managers working with teams with the size of anything between 5 to 10 to 50 to say 500. If this were to work at with the instant gratification, nuanced sort of an emotion, how does or how can technology help in sort of helping this, or sort of leveraging, or how possibly people manager can leverage technology to sort of help them work this out at scale?
That's really not very difficult, honestly speaking, Yashika, because most companies of a mid-size have an HR system in place, and many of these HR systems have a recognition and rewards module that is there. Now, it determines how the company's philosophy is on how they want to record, how they want to reward, and they want to recognize people who do stuff well. And there are companies who have platforms that can immediately on the spot give a badge or a thank you card or some kind of a small appreciation to people, which automatically gets posted on the company's intranet. So
Hmm.
it's people getting recognized, and getting flashed on the internet, which is one way of getting recognized. Plus, people can kind of take that post to social media as well. I'm a strong believer that everybody in the company should be allowed to recognize anybody in the company, because some
Nice one. This
companies
is
say
so
that,
nice.
yeah, because some companies say, you know what, you're too junior, you may be not having so much of experience, so how are you going to think what is good, what's not great? I think
That's
that's a
valid.
completely incorrect attitude. Anybody should be allowed to recognize anybody. And I think that's great because
That's so
I
nice.
I believe that when you get recognized, from a peer or from a colleague, that recognition is more precious and more meaningful as compared to getting recognized from your manager.
Absolutely.
That's my personal
Yeah,
impression.
yeah.
But so there should be these kind of opportunities, and there are tools and systems in place that really enable that, and that is done in many organizations.
We'll take this a notch higher, and let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about performance appraisals. We're so used to the dated ways of performance appraisals. At some point in time, maybe it was post 6 months. Today, maybe it's a quarterly sort of an appraisal system. But do you think that this system works in today's case? Or if it doesn't, what do you think organizations should adopt when
So,
it comes to performance appraisals?
Sika, you've asked me a question which I'm very passionate about. So we'll probably make 2 hours to talk about this. But I'm gonna make it as kind of brief as I can, and stop me whenever you want me to. So if I were to ask people listening to this podcast, to raise their hands and ask people how many people feel that their performance review process, and here there's a performance review and there's an increment. So I'm talking about the performance review, the fairness, the transparency. So if I ask
Hmm.
people to put up their hands and say how many of you believe that your performance review process in your company is effective, um, I don't think you would have too many people raising their hands. And there are
Absolutely.
multiple drawbacks about this. One of the things is that I think you mentioned annual performance review. Some companies do it once a year. Some companies do it, 6 months. I
Yeah.
think that's just way too long, because, like I said, giving feedback on a if you don't give it on the spot, You can use the same kids example again. If you don't give feedback on the spot, that impact is going to be that's going to be lost. So it has to be done on a much more continuous basis. That's one. The other one is that traditionally performance appraisal processes involve some timelines, and it involves a carrot and a stick approach. Let me give you an example. You hear HR people telling employees that, hey, you know what? 20th of Feb is the last day to fill up your self appraisal form. If you don't fill up the form by this day, no increment for you. The system will move on. So come 5:30 in the evening on 20th of Feb, everybody wakes up and says, you know what? I have like 2 hours to fill up my form. Let me do it now. And in half an hour, they summarize their entire year's performance, so called, and they put in the form and they send it to the manager.
This is
Same
such a
thing.
realistic scenario.
Same thing happens with the manager. Manager is busy with work, and then manager is going to come and ask the HR person, "Do you want me to focus on the customer, or do you want me to fill up the appraisal form?" And then HR comes and says, "Hey, 31st of March, 6 p.m. If you don't fill up your team's forms, you're not going to get an increment." And then managers
Yeah.
start opening up the forms at 5 o'clock in the evening and do a really shoddy job. And then HR is extremely happy. Why? 100% compliance. Everybody has done their job and the process is complete. I think this is, I mean, what process are we talking about? I mean, the quality of forms that go into this is kind of really sad. That's the second one. The third one is people come in an organization, people go in an organization. If you're going to have a yearly review and you work with three managers, and it happens that out of those three people, two have quit and they have not given you feedback, and your last manager has given you bad feedback, and the other two experiences were good, there's a very strong possibility that you may just not get feedback.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
that's really, really unfair. So that's one more aspect. The other one is that I think these annual reviews are looking a lot backward. It's like looking in the rearview mirror of a car or a bike. You're looking at, hey, what happened in the last 12 months? Tell me, and not too much about what's looking at what's happening in the future. And then, unfortunately, many traditional performance review forms, the outcome is the number, which is, am I like a meet expectation, exceeded expectation, am I grade A, grade B, grade C? And then when you're having that so-called discussion with your manager, nobody is bothered about what has happened in the last year. Nobody is bothered about the comments that have gone in the form. Everybody is bothered about the rating. And why are you,
Yeah.
the argument, why are you giving me a B rating? Why am I not an A grader? Why are you doing this to me? So that kind of stuff, I mean, it's just focused around the rating. So I think there are more, but these are some elements that I think really break up or shatter the myth that these legacy and time bound feedback processes are useful. So that's the bad stuff. Um, if you ask me what is the way to go ahead, it's very simple. You just have to engage with your people and talk to them on a more continuous basis and have dialogue. Um, so, what kind of process would be optimum? I think at least once a month, the manager and the direct need to have a conversation about how things have gone in that particular month. And if you have a
Mm.
system that does that, great. You can set goals. Obviously, the goals can't be cast in stone, so your system should be flexible enough to kind of change these goals. Because today I'm playing a particular role, tomorrow I may play a different role. So my goals need to change. So every month I need to know how I'm doing on my goals, on my key result areas, so I know. And rather than having a descriptive discussion, I think it's great if it's given in a system and it gets recorded somewhere, so the employee knows exactly how he or she is doing. And when you rate your
So a
goal,
transparency
yeah,
in
because
terms of
absolutely, because when you say something, it gets misinterpreted, and you say, "Oh, I said this," and he'll say, "Oh, I thought you meant this." So when it is in black and white, this is pretty much there cast in stone. So that becomes very, very transparent. So that's, I think, that's something that needs to happen. So that's just one aspect of feedback, Yashika. I think it's just not about giving feedback and about appraisals and stuff like that. I think it's more about creating an environment of trust, creating an environment where employees and their managers can talk more freely. without any fear or without apprehensions. So apart from just rating the goals, I think this discussion that I said should happen, once a month, and it just needs to happen for about 30-40 minutes. Questions could be asked like, hey, tell me, what did you like about the stuff you did in the last month? What more would you like to take on and grow in your career? I think you did this fantastically. Let me appreciate you for this stuff that you did. Again, so that's recognition coming on a quicker basis. Or you
Hmm.
can say, you know what, I don't think you handle the customer call very well. Let me coach you and give you some feedback on how you can do it better. So it's more dialogue
A
that is
casual
happening.
setting or formal setting?
Sorry.
A casual setting or a formal setting?
A blended setting. A blended setting. So yeah, I think there should be a system doing this. So this is conversational, but it's getting recorded into a system. So the setting
Interesting.
is casual, but it is getting recorded into a system, so that makes it formal. So hence, it's a kind of casual blended system.
Lovely. Now we'll get on to, of course, another extended aspect of the performance appraisal part, um, learning and development. At this juncture and this day and age, where resources for learning are available at the click of a button, clearly traditional L&D models cannot thrive, or at least cannot help organizational the organizational system, the teams. um, what are some of the effective strategies, according to you, to foster a culture of continuous learning, but in more engaging ways for younger generations and generally employees, where they're anyway part of the attention economy, to get their attention but yet to get them to learn and grow?
So, I think learning is another area that has been completely been transformed. It's been kind of put on its head completely. Things have just been
Yeah.
reversed. And I think that's because of the democratization and the availability of learning. So I think um, learning needs to move from a push mechanism. And when I say push, I mean managers identifying learning needs for somebody, a company coming up with a beautiful training calendar which will say that 8 months from now you will have learning on this particular technology. So that's more, and then employees saying, hey, can I please attend, and manager saying, oh, let me think about. So that's more like a push approach. I think that has moved to a more pull approach, which is employees decide what they want to learn, when they want to learn it, and how they want to learn it. So that's one aspect that is there. I think learning also happens best on the job. I think there are various
Hmm.
statistics that say, about 70 to 80% of learning happens when you're working with somebody, observing that person, and repeating what that person is doing. So there's a phrase which is called learning in the flow of work. Learning in the flow
Yeah.
of work. And I think that is really important. So organizations are slowly moving to a direction where learning happens in the flow of work, and it is totally pulled based. The employee can decide what to learn, when to learn, and how to learn. Let me give you a couple of examples. And with tools like chat gpt, this has become even more fun, and it's become even more engagement. So um, so let me give you an example of a software engineer or software developer who has written a bit of code, and there's a problem with the code. So,
Hmm.
how is the person going to learn how to get better at writing code or to solve that program? So that software developer wants help at that point of time. She doesn't have the luxury of saying, "Oh, there's a learning program coming up in 3 months' time. Let me wait and take that. Then I will
Yeah.
become better." It has to be
Very
solved
true.
then and there.
Yeah.
So, what will she do in an ideal new system? She will log on to the company's intranet, and there'll be various groups of people, and she'll identify a bunch of tech experts, and she'll shoot this question out to them. And she'll get an answer on the topic in a few minutes or so. Or simply open ChatGPT, type in your question, and in a fraction of a second get your answer. So this is the way actually learning happens. Or another example is, we spoke about the performance review process. Imagine an employee is going in for their performance review discussion, and that employee wants to negotiate a higher raise.
Hmm.
Simply go to ChatGPT and say, I am going in for my performance review discussion, give me 5 tips to negotiate with my boss for a better raise. Now,
Mm.
that is learning in the flow of work. You're not
Mm-hmm.
going to wait for your company to put up with a training calendar which says, "Acha, in September there's going to be a negotiation skill program," and then you hope that your manager nominates you for it, and you hope at that point of time you're not. It doesn't work anymore like that. So it's
Yeah.
completely kind of it's completely transformed. Another very effective way in which companies are doing learning in the flow of work is by sending very subtle messages to the organization on topics that they want the organization to be kind of aware of. I mean, one simple example is the POS training, the prevention of sexual harassment training.
Mm.
So many companies have an online e-learning course that they want people to do, and that is good. That should happen because that's like a mandatory program. But once done, that's pretty much forgotten. So how
Mm.
about a company sending small snippets of emails to employees, which doesn't take the employee more than 20-30 seconds to read, actually 20-30 seconds to read, which gives them just one bit of information. And if you have a campaign of such emails or posters or
Nice.
snippets going out, it kind of reinforces the learning. And then after that campaign of 10 mails go out, you have a quiz and say, you know what, we're going to quiz you on this stuff. And you have like
Nice.
3 questions.
Love.
And then you recognize people using a reward and recognition platform, saying these people are like the top 3 people. You create a little leaderboard. So that's how learning actually is kind of transforming itself, Yoshika.
So interesting. You've actually within this little space covered L&D. You've covered employee engagement, and you've also sort of covered the uh, motivation and rewards and recognition part. Very interesting one. Tell us, as and you've been in the business for so long, almost 2 decades, or rather more than that, Neville. What is one aspect of people management that you see changing, or or sort of evolving, transforming?
I think working with multi-dimensional teams, diverse teams, is something that is, I mean, diverse team, which is becoming a problem for some people, and I think we need to learn to do better on that. And when I say diverse, it doesn't mean gender, but it means now with the hybrid way of working, we have people who join on Microsoft Zoom or they join on Teams or other such platforms. How do you keep them engaged? Because sometimes when we are in a meeting, we kind of tend to focus on meeting people who are with us and we forget people on calls and they feel left out. So that's one aspect. I think working with different uh, people who have different levels of competencies really makes a difference. So I think these are some areas where I think HR people need to kind of think a little differently. And with hybrid thrown in, with hybrid sprinkled all over the place, it's just not making it easier. So we are pretty much used to either completely working from office or completely working from home. Those are
True.
two opposite poles. But the minute you kind of marry those together, the whole equation changes. And I think that is some confusion that people, not only HR, but I think entire people in organizations have that challenge. So I think that is something that needs to be worked on.
Interesting. What does achievement mean to you?
What does achievement mean to me? um, well, I think achievement for me is, firstly, not not comparing yourself with anybody else, but comparing yourself with yourself and asking the question that, am I doing better than what I was a month ago? Or
Mm.
asking yourself that, as compared to January, have I learned something new in the last 5 or 6 months? Or asking myself that, I set a goal out, personal goal or a professional goal. I've set a goal out, and have I achieved that? And if I have, or I've partly achieved that, I think you need to pat yourself on your back. The point is, I think achievement sometimes is very relative. It is
Mm.
that, oh, I got a 10% increment, but she got 20% increment. So is she better than me? Or he lost 3 kilos in 2 months and I've only lost two. So what am I doing wrong? So I think
Yeah.
that's really not the way of looking at it, because um, you know he could have lost 3 kilos because he had a serious illness and he
True.
lost muscle and fat. But I've lost 2 kilos in spite of being healthy and working out, and I've lost all that weight in fat. So if I compare that with myself, I think you will feel happier. So the minute you start comparing with everybody, I think achievement goes out of a toss. So achievement is just compared with yourself.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing these examples and for sharing uh, these examples from a modern workplace scenario or a modern work environment context. Because um, as we progress into a space where things will be blended, like you said, there is so much internal transformation that also needs to happen. But thanks for being on the show, and thanks for sharing your wisdom with us. Appreciate it. Thanks, Neville.
It was great fun. Thanks, Yashika. Good to be here.